McLaren just went from breakdown to breakthrough. In less than 24 hours, they turned a technical failure into one of the fastest laps of the entire test. Lando Norris clocked a time just 0.2 off Hamilton. Oscar Piastri nearly matched Ferrari on a harder tire. And here's the twist, the MCL40 wasn't even running in full performance mode. What they revealed in Barcelona wasn't just pace, it was a warning. Because McLaren isn't coming to survive this season, they're coming to rewrite it. Stay with us, because what happens next might just flip the entire grid upside down. The test hadn't even started properly, and McLaren was already in trouble. Just 48 laps into Thursday's session, Oscar Piastri pulled into the garage, not for a tire change, not for setup tweaks, but because something was wrong. The car wouldn't respond properly under throttle. Fuel pressure was unstable. Telemetry looked scrambled. The team stopped everything. At first, it looked minor. A sensor issue, maybe. Then, they realized the truth. It wasn't software. It wasn't the dashboard. It was hardware. Inside the fuel system, a critical component had failed. Not cracked. Not fatigued. Failed. No backup. No workaround. And just like that, McLaren's test program was collapsing. While Red Bull and Ferrari were pounding through laps, collecting full race stints and energy deployment data, McLaren had a half-disassembled car in the garage, and the clock was ticking. Because with only 3 days of testing, every hour lost is a week of development gone. But then something happened that nobody expected. They didn't panic. They didn't point fingers. No PR excuses. No dramatic radio calls. Instead, they shut the doors, stripped the car to its core, and rebuilt it. Overnight. 12 hours of non-stop work. Engineers sleeping on the floor. Technicians double-checking every cable, every fitting. And by Friday morning, the MCL40 was back on track. But it wasn't just running. It was flying. Piastri did 80 laps that day. Norris added another 83. And together, they didn't just recover the lost time. They went faster than anyone expected. That's not luck. That's resilience. And in Formula One, resilience is everything. You can't simulate that. You can't map it. You can't model it in a wind tunnel. You only earn it when things go wrong. And you fight your way back. And that's exactly what McLaren just proved. But what makes this comeback even more incredible is what they did during those 83 laps. Because beneath the surface, the data told a story nobody was ready to hear. And that story starts with Oscar Piastri. Oscar Piastri wasn't supposed to be the headline. Not in a test where Hamilton topped the sheets. Not with Verstappen racking up over 100 laps. But on Friday morning, while most of the paddock was watching Red Bull's long runs and Ferrari's top-speed setups, Piastri quietly went out, ran a short stint, no soft tires, no low fuel, and clocked a 1 minute and 17.446 seconds, fourth fastest time of the entire week, on a medium compound, in a car that had been torn apart less than 24 hours before, with a setup that hadn't even been optimized yet. Let's put that into perspective. His lap was just half a second off Lewis Hamilton's soft tire flyer, and within a tenth of Sainz's best. That should not have been possible. Not for a car that missed valuable time. Not for a driver still adapting to the complex 2026 hybrid systems. And certainly not in a session McLaren said was just about mileage. So what happened? Simple. The car worked. The MCL40, even in recovery mode, had grip, balance, predictability. Piastri came on the radio after his run and said, "The feeling's solid. The grip is coming when I expect it." That might sound boring, but in Formula One, that's gold. Because the drivers aren't looking for drama. They're looking for consistency. And when a rookie-turned-second-year driver can match the pace of world champions, with one arm behind his back, that's when the engineers start whispering. And it wasn't just the time. It was how he got it. McLaren had spent Thursday night rebuilding everything, including their energy deployment strategy, new engine maps, new harvesting windows, new lift and coast points. Piastri was testing systems, not chasing laps. But even while learning, he was flying. Here's the real takeaway. Piastri didn't push the MCL40 to its limit. He didn't even get the chance. This was a setup lap, not a quali sim. No tow, no DRS games. Just one clean lap, in a car that had just come back from the edge. And it nearly beat Ferrari. That's not hype. That's a warning. And the paddock noticed. Because just a few hours later, Lando Norris stepped into the same car. And what he did next changed the entire tone of the test. McLaren wasn't just recovering anymore. They were attacking. Friday afternoon. Final session of the test. Temperatures dropped slightly. Track grip was coming up. The perfect window. And McLaren took it. They bolted on a softer tire, dropped the fuel, fine-tuned the balance, and gave Lando Norris one goal. Show us what this car can really do. 1 lap later? 1 minute and 16.594 seconds. Let me say that again. 1:16.5. Less than a quarter of a second off Hamilton's benchmark. Faster than Ferrari. Faster than Aston Martin. Faster than everyone expected. And this wasn't a late push lap when the track was rubbered in. This was mid-session. Still traffic on track. Still room to gain. Which means, that lap wasn't just a hot time. It was a message. And it wasn't just the clock. Trackside observers said the MCL40 looked planted. Calm over the curbs. No instability on entry. No twitching out of slow corners. It looked ready. That's not something you say about a team that just rebuilt its fuel system the day before. That's something you say about a car that's about to shock the grid. But here's what makes it even more impressive. McLaren isn't bringing major upgrades to Bahrain. No panic development. No rushed floor concepts. No desperate fixes. What we saw in Barcelona. That's the race car. And it just went toe-to-toe with Mercedes. In testing. That kind of confidence is rare. And it tells us something most teams won't admit out loud. McLaren isn't just aiming for podiums anymore. They're aiming higher. Lando Norris left the car that day with a quiet smile. He didn't say much to the press. He didn't make bold predictions. But behind the scenes, engineers were buzzing. Because the data said exactly what the lap time did. The MCL40 is fast. And more importantly, it's stable. No scary behavior. No unexplainable spikes. No mystery to solve before round 1. Just clean, reliable performance. And for a team that lost half of Thursday, that is terrifying. But the real twist? McLaren isn't even using the full potential of their power unit yet. Because Mercedes might be holding something back. And if what we're hearing is true, McLaren could be sitting on more horsepower than anyone's seen so far. Let's be clear. McLaren isn't running its own engine. It's not a Red Bull powertrains experiment. It's not Ferrari. It's Mercedes. The same power unit that drove Hamilton and Russell in Barcelona was also sitting in the back of the MCL40. But here's where it gets interesting. McLaren's top speeds were nearly identical to Mercedes. And in some runs, even higher. That's not normal. That's not customer team behavior. Because historically, factory teams always keep something in reserve. They get better maps, more aggressive deployment, earlier access to updates. But this year, it feels different. Because McLaren's power delivery looked smooth, efficient, confident, as if they were running the exact same settings. Sources in the paddock began whispering. Some claimed Mercedes was testing McLaren, feeding them engine maps usually reserved for the works team. Why? Because they want a benchmark. An honest, aggressive customer. With nothing to lose. And everything to prove. McLaren isn't politically tied to the title. They're not hiding performance. They're just pushing. And in Barcelona, those pushes created some very uncomfortable comparisons. Let's break it down. McLaren. Fewer laps than Mercedes. Less test time. 1 full day compromised. And yet, Lando Norris finishes just 0.2 off Hamilton's time. With less prep, less track time, and a brand new chassis concept. That's not just impressive. That's a red flag. For Mercedes. Because if McLaren can extract that much pace from the same engine, after a day and a half of chaos, then what happens when they get a clean weekend? What happens when Bahrain hits? What happens if the customer beats the master? It's not just speculation. McLaren insiders have confirmed that Bahrain will feature the same spec power unit as Mercedes. No detuned maps, no restrictions, full performance mode. Which means, whatever gap we see in the season opener, it's real. No politics, no sandbags, just speed. And that's why Mercedes engineers were seen watching McLaren's runs more closely than anyone else. Because if McLaren gets this right, if the car stays reliable, if Lando and Oscar keep pushing, then we're looking at the return of a threat Mercedes thought they buried 5 years ago. But there's one more twist. It's not just the engine. It's not just the drivers. It's the philosophy behind the MCL40. Because McLaren isn't just going faster. They're building differently. They're thinking differently. And the final block of this story exposes the design decision that could make this car the surprise of the season. While every top team is planning major changes before Bahrain, McLaren isn't. No new floor. No new front wing. No experimental cooling. Nothing. They've made one decision. Lock the spec. And that tells us something huge. Because in Formula 1, there are two ways to approach the start of a season. You can bring a car that's unfinished and hope upgrades fix the weak points. Or you bring a car that's already working and just get better at using it. McLaren has chosen the second path. At first glance, it looks risky. Every other top team is chasing last-minute performance, trying to find a magic 10th, a shortcut, a surprise. But here's the problem with that game. When you change parts, you lose data. You lose setup time. And if the new component behaves unpredictably, you lose races. McLaren isn't taking that risk. Instead, they're bringing something more dangerous. Clarity. Because when a car behaves consistently, when the rear doesn't snap, when the power delivery is predictable, when the setup changes actually work, that's when drivers push. That's when confidence builds. That's when you start extracting performance. That doesn't come from the wind tunnel, but from inside the cockpit. And in Barcelona? That's what we saw. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri drove the same car for 3 straight days. They didn't waste time learning new wings. They didn't test 4 different floors. They just learned where it locks up, where it rotates, when to deploy, when to save. And by the time Friday ended, they knew exactly what they had. That's not a head start. That's an attack plan. And here's the detail most people missed. McLaren's chassis ran cooler than expected. Their energy deployment stayed consistent. Their battery temps were under control. That means one thing: margin. They're not on the edge. They're not holding the car together with duct tape. They've got space to push and room to grow without changing anything. So while Ferrari gambles on a major upgrade, while Red Bull hides a flexi-wing, while Mercedes still chases balance, McLaren shows up with the same car, the same setup, and 2 drivers, ready to go to war. And if Bahrain delivers chaos, heat, failures, confusion, McLaren won't blink, because they already know what they've got. But there's one final question. Not about upgrades, not about strategy, about Lando Norris. Is this the year he finally stops being the underdog? Because the MCL40 might be ready, but is he? That's what we'll find out on race day.